let's begin by looking perhaps at the need for a, would I be accurate if I said you're a quasi-government agency?
Yes, definitely we are.
For
Thanks.
a quasi-government agency where we have government agencies, direct government agencies, and we also have so many non-governmental organizations doing the same type of work.
Yes. Thank you for having me. You all know that when government operates in the different areas, government has what we would call a national government or a national program of action. And for agencies similar to ours, it is very easy that government can be in a position to ensure that the program of government is implemented. Because South Africa is a developmental state, it is very clear that we cannot leave everything to be done by the people as they will. Government has to have a program in order to direct development given the history where we're coming from. Yes, we have a lot of community-based organizations, a lot of non-governmental organizations. Mostly those are funded, if not all, by the private sector. Development agencies like ourselves are there also to assist in bridging the gaps. There is no way that we can work within communities without these non-governmental organizations or community-based organizations.
Yeah.
They become our conduit of implementing programs of government in the different communities.
Yeah, but I suppose also the fact of setting up organizations like yours mean you need funding, and that funding has to come, I suppose, from the same source, partly government, partly the community in which that government operates. How difficult is it to get funding from government in this environment?
The Independent Development Trust has been in a very fortunate position in the sense that if you were to follow its history, we were given money way back in 1990, and this was headed then by Justice Steyn, given by the then President de Klerk. And there was a particular program that was being driven at that particular time, but it was also about infrastructure and development within communities. The IDT as it stands has evolved over a period of time. We became a grant-making organization, giving organizations funding. But there was a time when the strategy changed by the trustees to say, let us rather assist government in implementing its own programs. Up to this stage, I must be honest, we haven't received any money from government. We were given 2 billion at that time, and record has it, that we're working on, that we have implemented with that 2 billion, if we were to look at today's terms, what would have been worth 19 billion of what it was at that particular time. Let me also admit at the same time that we're at a stage where we are also looking upon government to assist us to replenish our investment. But yes, up to date as I'm talking to you, we're still using part of that 2 billion given to us in 1990.
So before we talk about you asking for more money from the government, can we talk about how efficiently you've been able to use that money? You are telling me that the 2 billion that you were given, in essence, has sort of created a value equal to 19 billion rand. Are you more efficient in implementing those programs than government, would you say?
I'm positive about that, for the simple reason that we have our own systems that we use. We have a terminology that we use within the IDT that you call, we respond. For the simple reason that tender processes that we use tender processes like any other organization, not necessarily like government. Our turnaround time is quicker, and we're able to reach out. We do not have the red tape that we have. You'd be surprised to hear that even the red tape that you find at government at times frustrates us. But we're able to cut across those instances where we find ourselves, not only disturbed, but thwarted in what we need to do. What normally happens is when government has identified a project, let's say for argument's sake, a school in the north of the country, somewhere in Limpopo, government would say, we have so much which we have to use to put up that school. They ask the IDT. So we are there to implement social programs for government, social infrastructure, schools, clinics, courts, multi-purpose centers. So we move in, we use government's money, let's say they say 24 million for putting up a school or constructing a school. But to you and me, that's brick and mortar. This is where the IDT adds value. This is where we see ourselves as a development agency, in the sense that we bring in what we call value add. We talk about institutional capacity building, assisting local authority, provincial government, national government in the implementation, because the IDT has got a cadre of professionals. Someone might say we're very expensive in terms of the professionals that we have. We take the best to make sure that when we implement things that we know would be sustainable, which doesn't mean that we don't make mistakes. We do make mistakes.
You sound to me like you're saying you're working like a private company. But let's talk about how much you need. So how much are you asking for the government and over what period of time?
We've put in an application that over a period of time, over 3 years, if government could assist us with, say, 700 million, for us to be able to continue to add value to what government is asking us to do. But if all things were equal, we would safely ask for 5 billion. But we do know that the fiscus is very tight, and we have put in an application to have 700 over a period of 3 years.
What indications have you been given as to whether you'll be able to get that money or not?
With the support that I'm receiving from our minister, I report to the Minister of Public Works. I'm positive of the fact that we're being heard positively, but we'll wait and see when the Minister of Finance does his midterm. We're hoping for an answer mid-June, yes, okay. Mid-November, apologies.
27 October, actually.
27 October. So yeah. I'm sitting on my tenterhooks, waiting to hear what the minister is going to be saying to us. I am sure.
Let's move away from the money matters. Let's talk about the theme for this week's meeting. Now, you have it as making poverty history, leveraging communities for poverty eradication. Why that one?
Let me step back and say last year, when we have our development week in 2009, we were looking at methodologies and we were trying to use tools. Don't forget, during our development week, we bring in policy thinkers, we bring in academia, we bring in development activists, we bring communities in and even beneficiaries so that we could share and speak about things that affect them. And when the theorists, academia comes in, they speak to things that are very real. So last year we were talking about how do we deal with intergenerational poverty. And we came with a number of methodologies. Okay. So this year, we are talking about, we moved last year from rhetoric to practice. So this year, the theme seeks to address itself to the fact that we have learned, then how do we begin to put all that into practice? And this links very well with the fact that South Africa is taking a pause to say, as we move to 2015 for the Millennium Development Goals, where are we? And what is it that we can still do within this period of time? So we're borrowing from last year. Right. It's a continuation into this year. But we are going in depth in terms of the theories that we learned from the discourse of last year.
But clearly, given the challenges that we know are in the country, and given the fact that the economy is actually slid into a recession last year, 1 million jobs lost up to mid this year, it's going to be difficult to make poverty history.
Definitely. But I want to believe that as a development agency, because there's many development agencies in the country like ours, if we pulled our resources together and we continue to cry to have the private sector coming into play, I know they also have their own challenges, but we're saying government cannot do it alone. That I want to stress. Government cannot do it alone. So we all have to come in. And the IDT plays in this space of a gap between government, between communities, and there's a private sector somewhere. But we want to say we come with what I want to believe, theories and methodologies that can be used practically. We don't believe in putting documents on shelves, but we want to apply them.
So what help can you get from the private sector? And also, what help would you need from the private sector?
Private sector has got, what do we call it, CSI programs. Yes. They are community responsibility programs.
They've got nasty experiences of those CSI programs. Sometimes they're just meant to tick the books.
Exactly. This is what we're saying. Yeah. And in certain instances, they are driving their own program.
Yes.
But we're saying, can you imagine if there were to come a time when we pulled all these resources together in what one dreams of to be a development fund in the country? I've been in a country, I'm saying this with a lot of pride, I'm not hesitating. The other year, we visited one of the countries in the north. And in that year, there's a day in a year, during September, when everybody in the country, private sector, you and me as ordinary people, put into this fund. And then that fund it's known that government will drive it, but government uses development agencies like ourselves to make sure that programs that are driven are targeted delivery of programs.
Let's name that country.
Memory
Zambia?
Fails me. No, it wasn't. It was Tunisia. Apologies.
Tunisia.
Yes.
Is it working there?
It is working. It is working. We have borrowed some of those examples. We have also borrowed examples from Chile, which we are trying to implement in some of the programs that we have.
Yeah.
And we have seen them working with resistance here and there,
Yeah.
but we want to believe that we can shout enough and we will still continue shouting to make sure that it works.
Now, South Africa, of course, needs all the help it can get because it's one of the most unequal societies in the world. In fact, the numbers show with Brazil, there's a continuous fight to be the worst unequal society in the world. Given that, how possible will it be for South Africa to dream about achieving those MDG goals? Or are you a believer? Or do you just hope that things eventually, with hope, we can be able to get there?
I believe that we can only strive. We can only strive to reach a certain level in meeting those goals that we have to meet.
Yeah.
There's no way that we can say we have failed. And I want to believe that the programs that we're running, hence we're saying next week we'll also be taking stock together with the people who will be with us and together with our principals to see what is it that we can do more to strive and push towards the attainment of those goals.
Yeah.
We're not going to sit back and say we cannot. There are certain areas where, we always say during our discussions, some of the goals that are given and the targets given are minimalistics. Some we have reached, not as espoused, but some in terms of the targets that have been given over a period of time.
Yeah.
So I want to believe that we may not reach them 100%, but we are going to strive.
I want to ask you a difficult question. I'm saying difficult because I'm going to ask you if you see total commitment matched by an actual outlay of resources to support government programs to eradicate poverty. Do you get the sense that government has the commitment which has been matched by actual allocation of resources, and also the private sector? Do you get that sense of commitment?
I must be honest and say that the current government is committed. I'm not saying the previous governments were not. I'm talking for my time. They are committed, and from time to time we're called upon to give advice to government as to how to do it. And now I believe that we will see, once we can begin to be recapitalized. I'm not saying that is dependent on that.
Sure.
That to me will also be a commitment.
But it is
to
important.
show that government, is there and wants it to happen. They are committed. We have seen it, and that's why we're also, energized to make sure that it happens.